Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending this webinar with Randy Oliver. My name is Pat Bono, president of the New York Bee Wellness, which is an independent, educational, grassroots, charitable 501c3 non-membership organization. Its mission is to educate small-scale, sideliner, and beginning beekeepers. We do have a YouTube site with past in-person and online presentations. New York Bee Wellness also sends out newsletters several times a year, and we conduct statewide surveys twice a year for non-migratory beekeepers in New York State. Okay, Randy, thank you for coming back.
Okie doke. Just introduction. I'm juggling a lot of different research projects and looked at the calendar and realized I was supposed to be doing this presentation today. So we've been jumping back and forth between oxalic acid titrations and testing robbing screens out on the driveway and making up some nukes for tomorrow, and me running in and out and trying to put this presentation together. So this is absolutely the first time through. We'll see how we work on this. So all my research is funded by beekeepers, and I focus on applied research that beekeepers can use themselves. So I got an email, a WhatsApp this morning, I should say, from Azerbaijan. And I presented there last year. Azerbaijan, most Americans don't know where it is. It lies between the Caspian Sea here, which is a freshwater lake, and the Black Sea here, Russia being up here, Ukraine over here. If you come in here closer here, we fly into Baku, a very modern city, but the rest of Azerbaijan is really old time back there. A lot of flat country surrounded by mountains, and then the Caspian Sea on one side. The highways are interesting because the livestock just cross freely back and forth across all the highways, tons and tons of sheep and cattle. And during the winter, all the farmland is barren. The people all live in little towns. Nobody out on the farmland, no tractors, no nothing, but there are herds of 25 or 30 sheep or cattle with one herder walking along with them out in the middle of nowhere. I don't know how they get there or how they get home, but there's all these hundreds and hundreds of little herds with a single herder walking with them. Really neat open air markets with all kinds of produce and vegetables and beans, any kind of hardware. These are recycled glass jars. So it's a country where money is tight. They're under Soviet influence. Open air markets. You can drive down the highway, and there's meat hanging from posts right out in the open air along the highway. You stop and knock on a door and buy some meat right there. Very much into honeybees. This is a museum of beautiful, not Persian carpets, but similar, of 2,000 years of history of weaving these rugs, just hundreds of them. They're just breathtaking. You spend a day just looking at these, the history of these rugs. Very big into honey. This is one of the stands, shops selling all kinds of honey. And I picked this picture was up on the wall right here of a woman with the bees being in her heart right there. So I really liked this, the country. People are very much in love with their bees there. And at the conference, I was amazed that anywhere I go in these other countries, people all know me and know about my research. And I go, how do you know? My videos that I don't even record in videos, but like your videos, Pat, get translated into Azerbaijani, into Russian, into Turkish, into Iranian. All these people watch my videos, the ones that you record, and can ask me questions about them. Now, also note the color of the clothing in Azerbaijan. Everybody wears black. You go out in the street, and looks like as for California, we think, wow, a bunch of hoodlums lining the streets, because everybody wears black. While I was speaking there, I was taken aside and asked by my host whether I'd be willing to have a sit down with a Russian contingent, officials from Russia, beekeeping officials, and they had a real-time, high-profile translator. We got an hour and a half with them. And very interesting dealing with the Russians. First thing they asked if I'd come and speak in Persian in Russia. And I said, does the name Brittany Griner ring a bell? And not one of them had ever heard of her. They have no idea that Putin plays with Americans this way, with hostages and stuff. Some of them understood English, and luckily they were all facing me because I could tell very quickly which ones understood English, and my questioning of the authorities who didn't have much background in bee biology, and I could just see the people understood English just grinning, because I guess in Russia, nobody talks to the authorities that way. So I was, I guess, maybe too candid with some of them. I did get to hang out with a bunch of the beekeepers there. So here's a lunch where we all just, they took turns just asking questions. And I see this in various countries. People are all saying, oh, we think our problem's all nosema. They're just totally convinced the problem's nosema. Not one has ever looked through a microscope. There's no evidence whatsoever. And I asked them about the symptomology they see. I said, that's not nosema symptomology. You got other problems other than that. Oh, by the way, this kombucha here, a beverage, is just a light sugar water with fresh fruit in it, and very popular with all different kinds. Each one has a different kind of fresh fruit in it. A really nice, refreshing drink there, and enjoy the food there. But everybody is they're good beekeepers, but there's very little extension services or knowledge. It's like the Wild West out there. They can get any kind, there's no regulation of mite treatments whatsoever. They can get stuff in from China and from Iran and from Turkey and from Russia, and they mix them together, and there's combinations of every chemical, and it's just really a whole different ballpark, Wild West compared to the US. It was wintertime in November when I was there, so we didn't get much bee work, but they had these boxes. These boxes are 1.5 inch thick wood, and the deep Langstroth frames, 11 or 12 frames across. It takes 2 guys to pick up a single deep hive body in winter. They're just incredibly heavy, well insulated on the top, and they have little tiny clusters of bees in here that they winter. They're little dark bees that winter just fine. This morning, I got that WhatsApp video sent. I'll let you see it. You see this little mite right here? That's Tropilaelaps. Oh, I didn't tell you. When I spoke to the Russian contingent, they told me Tropilaelaps is established in Russia, and it's established in Ukraine. And a couple of us spoke with Canada's talking about opening the border for packaged bees. Right now, they are importing queen bees from all over the world, from Chile, from Italy, and from Ukraine. And we said, me and Sammy Ramsey wrote to the Canadian authorities saying, it is absolutely irresponsible for Canada to be importing any kind of bees from Ukraine, because Tropilaelaps is now established in Ukraine. That'd be the easiest way for Tropilaelaps to come into the United States. You've got to stop importing bees from Ukraine. In fact, you should not be importing bees from anywhere other than North America. That is just absolutely foolish to bring in bees and all new virus strains and variants and other diseases or parasites from across geographical barriers when we share bees right across the border. Bees don't care about the border. I was recently speaking in in British Columbia, Canada, where they grow huge amounts of blueberries right up to the US border in Washington. And some of the blueberry growers in Canada hire beekeepers in Washington State and US to park their hives across the border to pollinate their blueberries. So saying that they're going to have any border restrictions between US and Canadian bees is absolutely ridiculous. Exposing the US and Mexico to new pathogens and parasites from other parts of the world is irresponsible on the part of Canada. And I think if you guys have any contacts, let them know that we don't want stuff coming in. So if you haven't seen Tropilaelaps, this is what you're looking for. They still have very fast moving mites on the combs. For what it's worth, if we get Tropilaelaps, it's going to make a varroa look like nothing. It is an absolutely devastating parasitic mite, far worse of a problem than the varroa mite. Now, because of that, I've been talking to the people who are dealing with Tropilaelaps, and the only efficacious treatment they're finding right now is formic acid, because Tropilaelaps lives almost its entire life under the cappings. It very rarely comes out where it's exposed to any kind of miticide. You need something that gets inside the cappings. The two ways to right now to control Tropilaelaps are either an induced brood break or using formic acid. And they use it wildly over in Asia. They just dip like paint sticks directly into the formic acid and shove a stick in the hive and give a big flash of formic acid. So I am currently doing lots of research on formic acid, collaborating with others, trying to get one coming in from another country here to get it into the US. One of the experiments I recently did is to use another product. And this product came in packages. And this is a product not sold in the United States. I have a permit to experiment. And it releases 25 grams of 65% formic acid a day. And they recommend giving it 2 treatments 6 days apart. I thought, knowing that 25 grams of formic acid in a day in 24 hours is actually a very efficacious dose, and colonies can handle it well. So I went out and I applied it every day for 9 days in a row. Took the previous treatment out and put a fresh one in. It's a slow release formic acid, but it releases over 24 hours. I then went and did daily mite drops. It was starting 325 mites dropping the first day, dropping down, and then it just levels out to the average. And then on day 13, no more mites. I give you all a second to think why day 13, no more mites. Because for 12 days, you had mites in the brood from the original brood that was in there. So for 12 days, you're going to have brood being opened before the first treatment. And by 13 days, what this showed is that this level of mites coming out was not coming from the adult bees. This was all coming from the brood. The mites trapped in the brood, and as that brood emerged, then the mites would drop out. So I was able to back calculate from here, looking at, we had dropped 1,500 mites over the 16 days, and looking at your counts and averaging out this amount, I could tell that it appeared that virtually every mite under the cappings was killed by day 4. I did replicate this same treatment again, then back at home in another hive. And again, I go into, I also at this point dissected the brood in the, which day was it? One of these days, right here. Every single mite in the brood was dead that I looked at. I did at home, did the same type of thing, and again dissected it, and 18 out of 24 out of 20 mites were in the brood, in the sealed brood, were dead by day 4. So it looks like if you apply a proper dose of formic acid, we can get it evened out for 25 grams a day. A 4-day treatment would give you a 4-day brood break and completely pretty much eliminate the mites in a hive. So I'm not really happy with our choices of formic acid in the United States right now. I think we could do a whole lot better than what we've got right now. I did do a test this summer of some extended release oxalic acid. One of the new products out, the Veroxan, was not available at the time I started this trial, so I could not include that. I tested 3 different formulations of oxalic acid and glycerin strips, and also some of the thymol blocks that we may be able to cover later on tonight. One of the strips was by a Canadian company that makes a filter paper, and they sent me samples saying, hey, a lot of beekeepers in Canada are making the oxalic acid strips, the glycerin strips. Oh, and by the way, Randy Oliver is not promoting or encouraging any unapproved use of any mite treatment at all. We have registered treatments. Now, the EPA is very clear that they don't care if beekeepers experiment with oxalic acid in any way they want. There's no federal regulation anymore or enforcement against the use of oxalic acid, formic, or thymol by beekeepers for their own use. EPA has handed it over to these states to make the decision. So you don't have to ask the EPA because they don't care what you put in your hive as far as the natural miticides. But your state regulatory agency may. So if your intent is pesticidal, it is possibly subject to enforcement. If your intent is for some other purpose other than pesticidal use, then there's no regulation of these. So here's Rose right now testing these filter paper strips, and we found out they were kind of flimsy, hard to insert. The Aluin cap, which is the one from Argentina, or the strips, chipboard strips from New Zealand, work better. When we check back afterwards, you can see that the bees often will, when you have with hung strips, as opposed to putting sponges across the top bars, they'll often stay clear of the acid right here and move their brood to either side. We also put in 4 thymol blocks. Again, this is an experimental method. We found last year, if we have time, I'll get to it, that 10 grams a block, 40 grams in total of thymol. That's a very large dose, a 40-gram dose. The typical dose for other thymol treatments is 12 grams for a time release over a week. I found by using these fiberboard, insulation board blocks, 1 inch, they're ½ inch thick, inch wide, 4 inches long. You could put 40 grams of thymol in the hive, and it was much gentler on the bees than an Apigard or a Thymovar or an Apolife var treatment. They did not stop brood rearing, and highly efficacious when applied in the top during the summer. So I did a lower dose between the brood chambers this summer of only 30 grams, and you'll see the results in a bit. One thing is the bees continue to rear brood nicely with the thymol treatment. And we look at our, this is my first graphs of what we did. We put them, did mite counts in these hives, mite wash counts on August 5th. And then after just a little under a month, we did them again. Then we let it run for another. So we got almost 2 full months on this trial before we had to do something else with these bees here. And you can see the Aluin cap, and by the way, Aluin cap is Coordinated Action Project. It's a group of beekeepers and researchers working for the benefit of honeybees in the town of Aluin in Argentina. So Aluin cap is their, in case you're wondering about the derivation of this name, is their group. And they invented these oxalic acid glycerin strips. And these are sold widely throughout South America and registered for use. And I brought a package back from Epamondia in Chile. And again, I have an experimental use permit in the state of California to experiment with oxalic acid. So Aluin cap did a pretty good knockdown in the first month. We didn't find with the cellulose sponges, it usually takes about 2 months to get a good knockdown. So the Aluin cap did a good knockdown and held them pretty low. The filter paper, again, did a pretty good knockdown the first month, but then was not lasting. They actually started to come back up again. the New Zealand strips, and this one were on 1-to-1 formulation. Which means 1 gram of oxalic acid to 1 gram of glycerin. I think ion cap is 1 to 2 or 2.5, much higher glycerin ratio. But my testing is, when I've tested these side by side with different ratios, the 1-to-1 works best for us in my location. The Thymol blocks knocked the mite counts down pretty well, but didn't keep them quite as well. Whereas when we did it on the tops of the hives in hot weather, it just zeroed. It took every single hive down to 0 on mites. So we got to learn about how to apply them between the brood chambers. Now, one of the manufacturers of the strips was wondering about shelf life and sending actually 2 of the manufacturers. The 2 manufacturers are contacting me about their development of strips, and they were curious on the shelf life of them, how long they would be, the oxalic acid would be active. Because I published that oxalic acid degrades very rapidly when it's exposed to glycerin or any organic like cellulose. So I would expect that there would be a decrease in the acid. They sent me some tests independently that there was no degradation. I said, well, what was the test? They said, well, we sent it to a testing lab. And I said, I bet they did not test for oxalic acid. What they probably tested for was oxalate ion. And they said, oh, no. They said they were testing for oxalic acid. I said, ask them. And they found out, no, they were testing for oxalate ion. And Nanetti in Italy years ago already published that the oxalate iron does not affect the mites at all. Now, I had a little bit of argument with one of the testing companies about this because they said, well, the oxalate iron is the active ingredient. And I said, no, it's not the active ingredient. Well, they wouldn't believe me. So, but we found, oh, here's some data from a couple of years ago. If you put an oxalic acid in water on top of a glass cover slip and put it out on the shelf for 12 days, there's no degradation of the oxalic acid. If you add it to, if it's vaporized onto a bee, if it is mixed with sugar solution or glycerin solution, it very rapidly degrades. Even in the first 12 hours, you have a huge amount of degradation. And then by 6 days, you're down to very low residues of oxalic acid. So I went ahead and I mixed up some sodium oxalate, which is very easy to make. So now you have the oxalate ion, and I set up a cage trial where I took equimolar solutions of either oxalic acid or sodium oxalate and sprayed the bees lightly with them. And then these are screened bottoms here. Then I can count the number of mites that died, and then wash the bees afterwards to see the remaining mites, so I knew what percentage of the mites died. And you see here, the total mites that were in is the blue, and the number of live mites remaining is the red. And once treated with the oxalate, you had virtually all of the, you had a 6% mortality. That's like the control group would have. Very low mortality of the mites, and close to 100% mortality of all the ones with the oxalic acid. So this just shows that the active component is not the oxalate ion, it's the hydronium ion, the acid ion of oxalic acid. And that's why other acids also will work. It has nothing to do with the oxalate. It's just that oxalic acid is the strongest organic acid, and that's why it's efficacious. So, next question. Okay, a lot of people are using oxalic acid vaporizers, and a lot of manufacturers are making different kinds of oxalic acid vaporizers. And one of the questions out there is, what percentage of the oxalic acid actually makes it out of a vaporizer? What we know is that oxalic acid begins to sublimate, between 150 to 170 degrees centigrade. And at 190, it can degrade into maybe a tiny bit of formic acid, but at atmospheric pressure, it degrades into carbon dioxide and water. I did some initial trials a few years ago with one of the common off-the-shelf vaporizers and found, wow, when I measure the amount of oxalic acid coming out of a vaporizer compared to what I put in, a lot of it's not there. It has apparently degraded. So I've been this last few weeks, there's a manufacturer of a vaporizer in Bulgaria, was selling it in New Zealand, and the distributor in New Zealand put us together, and he sent me one for testing. So I've been busy doing measuring how much oxalic acid actually comes out of a vaporizer. So here's a picture of a vaporizer. This is a thermal camera image I took and pointed it right here at it's 172 degrees centigrade. So this is at vaporization temperature, just below degradation temperature. And you can see the plume of vapor coming out here. It cools very quickly. And by this point, it is just recrystallizing in. And you can see it. When it first comes out, it's invisible. It's clear because it's all vapor. The white that you see is not vapor. The white are little tiny microcrystals of oxalic acid and condensate of water. So the oxalic acid dihydrate. First thing it does when it goes in the vaporizer, the water boils off at 100 degrees C, about 105 degrees C, it releases from the oxalic acid. Then the oxalic acid begins to sublimate around 150 and 170 degrees C. And at 190 degrees C, what we see is if we shoot this into a mylar balloon, there's no inflation of the balloon whatsoever until you reach 190 degrees, which means that the acid and water are coming out as vapors and then recondensing immediately when they get in the balloon. So the balloon does not, even with this huge cloud of vapor coming out, the balloon does not blow up one little bit. At 190 degrees, it starts to blow up a little bit when the oxalic acid starts to degrade. So what I do is I take the gun and I shoot it into a chilled tube right here. And these are the crystals of the oxalic acid. Most of it recrystallizes within the first inch of going in this tube. Nothing comes out the other end at all, other than carbon dioxide gas. And that's what inflates the balloon. Then we shot this this morning quickly just for this presentation right here. Can you hear the sound? Oh, can you, Pat, can you hear my voice? Oh, I can't hear your voice.
I can't hear the video.
You can't? Okay. Tell you what, let me start again. Okay, let me take this headphones off. I'll do a voiceover here. Let me start back to the beginning. Okay, I'm showing how we do the titrations. And this is how we quantify how much oxalic acid there is. We've been developing this technique now for a few years, and we got it dialed in. So we have this is lab grade oxalic acid right here. Here's a burette for titration that we can measure exactly how much drips out of here. And we have our titrant solution here that we have tinted with phenolphthalein dye in order to show it's slightly basic. Now, if we put in a tiny bit of oxalic acid, first I will measure here. So normally I start up at 0, but this one we were at 50. Now watch what happens when you put a tiny bit of acid into here. And this is, I have a stirrer. You can't see it going. There's a magnet Teflon stirrer spinning around. See the vortex coming down? So that's stirring this right here. And that wasn't quite enough acid to make it acidic enough to neutralize this. Now watch the color here. As the acid dissolves, once the pH drops below 8.2, the phenolphthalein indicator turns clear. Now, if we measure how much of this titrant, this carbonated titrant, goes back to turn it back to pink, we know exactly how much oxalic acid there was. So you can see it turns pink, but when it at the vortex, but when it goes out, it will turn clear again. So I'm adjusting it so that you have better stirring action. And it's stirring quickly. The camera doesn't show this. Now, right there, it's starting to go. So I shut down the drops and go in slow, drop at a time. And we're watching the endpoint. The endpoint is it turns back to the original pink color. So you titrate till you reach the endpoint. So you got to practice first so you don't turn the damn knob the wrong direction. Right there, bingo. Now you have to wait for 30 seconds to make sure that it stabilizes. And you read this right here. And I was getting ready to read it, and then we looked at it, and you see it, it turned back to clear again, which means you need a little bit more. We got to get that endpoint to hold for 30 seconds. So you can put in just a drop at a time. Now we're talking about milligrams, thousands of a gram on these drops right here. So it's very, very accurate. And that's how we do it. So we're doing on this scale we've done thousands at microgram scale, milligram on the bees. We're doing dozens and dozens here. And we like to sing this song. My apologies to the Beach Boys while we're doing our titrations here. Okay, enough for miticides. Second thing, I had a manufacturer who wanted to know, could they make the claim that their anti-robbing screens would reduce mite immigration into their hives? Oh, question. Pat, I'll put my headphone back on.
Hey, if oxalic acid degrades significantly in 12 hours, how are extended release pads working through the 40 to 50-day treatment?
It doesn't all degrade. A proportion of it degrades. And there's still plenty. There's when you put an extended release pad in, for about 3 days, the amount of oxalic on the bees goes up. Then it declines very rapidly. Then it stays at an extremely low level, just 3 to 4 micrograms per bee, where you want to get up around that 40 micrograms per bee level for efficacious varroa control. But apparently, a 3 microgram or 4 microgram level, if a mite steps on that, and it's because it's not evenly distributed in the bees, that's enough to cause that mite to die. So it's like a death from 1,000 slow cuts for the varroa population, not the individual mite, but for the population as a whole. It just apparently slows down the reproductive rate enough that the mite population dwindles to nothing from that slow extended release. So there's no buildup of oxalic acid in a beehive whatsoever. It very quickly degrades down to a very low level, especially after a vaporization. Okay, anti-robbing screens. So when I just was speaking in New Zealand recently, and they are in deep shit over there, pardon the expression. The Manuka honey market collapsed, so there's no income. They can't sell their honey. Guys are sitting on tens of thousands of pounds of honey for 2 years now in their warehouses, unable to sell it. So they have no income at all. And meanwhile, because of all the gamblers who came in and paid huge amounts of money, you can sell a nuke for $1,500 or something like that, or $700 a nuke, $1,500 a hive. The number of beehives went up like by a factor of 3, and now there's no money in it. They're abandoning these hives, and varroa is building up in them, and they're getting robbed out, and they're spreading American foul brood. And the beekeepers are all saying, "Oh, it's all mite immigration causing our problem." And I said, you know what? My research is showing that it may not be mite immigration. I think it's more that your synthetic miticides are failing, because they're all stuck on flumethrin and amitraz, and they're both starting to fail, just like they are everywhere else in the world. Across the world, amitraz and flumethrin are failing as miticides. The mites have developed resistance to it. So in many countries now, beekeepers are just laughing at the synthetic miticides, not using them. In this country, they are still working for many commercial beekeepers, but they're not working as well. So anyway, the question from one of the manufacturers was, can I claim that they reduce mite immigration? So we started out, I did 3 trials, field trials, to answer this question. But then by that time, I had more questions. So I also wondered about their effect on the colony and whether they can thwart scout bees who are necessary to initiate robbing, and then they can actually prevent robbing from happening. So we're going to go through a few different things. These are all things that I have done in the last, 2 months. So we all know about robbing. Okay, so bees practice what's called kleptobiosis, conspecific kleptobiosis. So conspecific means the same species, klepto means to steal, biosis is you're stealing food from other members of your same species. Now think about this. That does not help the colony that the food was taken from. But in a natural situation where you have in an environment a particular locally adapted race of bees, locally adapted population, not even a race, they're all pretty much related in any area. So that genome that they share, even though there's a little bit of differences, that is a particular local genome. They have precious stores of honey, very hard-won stores of energy. If a colony starts to fail for some reason, that honey will immediately be plundered by ants or other predators. It may be better that it actually goes to your relatives. So this conspecific kleptobiosis, this constant checking to see if there's any unguarded stores to take them back, you're actually sharing it. If you're dying, you're sharing it with your relatives and helping them out. So a different way of thinking about this, the whole concept of quote unquote robbing. The other thing, and I'm writing about this now, be publishing it in the American Bee Journal, is that it ain't robbing. It's just foraging. There's no evil intent. There's no intentional fighting. It's just, they are just foragers finding an easy source of nectar. And if it's unguarded, they will help themselves to it. So robbing screens, I happened to come across where they actually were invented. And it's in the book Queen Ring by Laidlaw and Eckerd, written in 1962. It's on my bookshelf. I never noticed, but Laidlaw is the one who invented the first robbing screen back here. Figured out how to do it, made me a tiny little entrance here. And I just, yesterday, I went out to the table saw and I built one of these. So I'll show you a picture of it in a minute. But we've been testing other robbing screens. So the traditional one that we usually see, this one's actually made by some friends of mine in my town, Janet Brisson, Country Rubes, and a traditional screen robbing screen. Here's my copy of the Laidlaw screen here. I left a wider opening here. We just tested this for the first time today. I finished this test minutes before coming back. I was going in and out all day with one of my helpers out there. We're counting the number of bees that came in. This is a plastic one made by Bee Smart. This is one coming from New Zealand, a stainless steel one with a little entrance right up here. So I'm publishing some articles, testing out ventilation and stuff because there's a lot of air friction right here. So I question, whether they have too much air friction compared to here, because the bees come to the scent coming out of the hive. So here, there's scent coming out up here, maybe a little stronger than right here. We'll see the results of the difference. So can they reduce mite immigration? So I ran 3 different trials. One was a crossover, or 2 of them were crossover trials, which means I put guards on half the hives and not on the other half. And then partway through the trial, you reverse them and you run them for a while, and then you reverse them back. It's called a crossover trial. So each hive is either gets the treatment or does not get the treatment, and gets the treatment again. And you see if the treatment makes a difference. The treatment in this case being having a robbing screen on. But first, to check for immigration, you got to eliminate all the mice in the hive. So I use a combination of synthetic and organic miticides and hit the hives hard until there are no more mites at all living in this hive, a totally mite-free colony. Unlike my resistant colonies, where you will get a mite wash count of 0, count after count after count, there's always mites in that hive. It's just too low level to detect. We need to take it down until there's no mites at all. So we eliminate all the mites, and we put sticky boards in. I make my own sticky boards out of a corrugated shower wall plastic, fiberglass reinforced plastic, which works really well. And you hit it with a Marshall felt pen for grids, and you can use these for years and years and years, over and over again. Really, the handiest one ever. There's instructions on my website how to make these. And then I'm doing so many sticky counts that I made a box that carries everything I need right here. Has the roller tray for putting on the sticky. We use a mixture of Vaseline and mineral oil. Your counters right here, your reading glasses, the clipboard fits in crossways, paper towels. So when we walk out to the yard, you just carry this box and everything you need is in this box. Really handy. And we then roll the Vaseline and mineral oil mixture, very thin layer. You do not want a thick layer because it's too hard to count the mice. Just a little bit, and the mite that keeps the mice stuck there. Then after you're done, you just take a sheetrock knife and you go 2 swipes and bingo, it's all cleaned off, and you can roll it again. So very quick. These are reusable boards, and we have them numbered, so you have your hive number with your board number. Now, if you're doing sticky boards and you're trying to try this, what I found is when you look at a sticky board, you can see spaces between the brood combs, and you see this trash from the cappings where bees are emerging. So to find out if there's any mites, resident mites still alive in the hive, if their mites are dropping in the trash from the brood combs here, you've still got mites reproducing in that hive. If instead, only mites you find are outside the brood area, these are mites that are coming in from outside the hive, immigrating in and falling out here. And you don't see any mites falling between the brood combs. This is one way to check. So here's Rose out here working with me, doing lots of counting in this first test yard right here. And what we did is we randomly assign, we go to each pair of hives and flip a coin. One gets a guard, one does not get a guard. And then partway through, after we get several mite counts, we'll flip them again. So no screens here. So this would be our baseline. These are mite counts. So this would be for twice a week we did it. So this would be, like a 3-day mite count right here. So pretty moderate right here, mite counts coming in. So the reds have the screens on and the blues have the screens off. And so when you put what you're looking for to see, when you put the screen on, you'd expect it to drop. Well, actually it went up putting the screen on. And when the screen is off, they went up. So no effect of the screens, notice here. Then we reversed it. What did we do? We moved some hives in there, some real hot weather here. And then we switched them again. So now the screens went off. And when they went off, the mite count did not go up. It went down, just the opposite of what you expect. And when you put the screens on, the mite count went up. Again, the opposite of what you expect. So no indication that the robbing guards were reducing the amount of mite immigration. Now we're getting September, starting to get rainy and cold. Notice when it's rainy or cold, your mite immigration drops to close to 0 because the bees aren't flying. When it warms back up, your mite immigration starts again because the bees are flying again. And so we swap them one more time, put the screens on, and again, just the opposite of what you think. When you put the screens on, the mite immigration went up slightly, and the screens off, didn't have a change there. So we did not get supportive data from trial number 1 that it was a benefit. Now, while we were running this one, we ran another trial, a non-crossover trial, a comparative trial. So we had 5 different yards of bees. My sons had. We did mite wash counts on all of them. we gave them a half of a oxalic acid pad, enough we thought might kind of hold the mite levels level, but not take them down, a low treatment. And then each pair of hives, we flipped a coin and assigned treatments. First, we made sure that both groups had roughly equal mite levels. So we moved them around if that was necessary. So the yards were all crowded, so lots of mite and bee drift from hive to hive. And so we replicated this in 5 different yards. And if we look at the change in mite counts, 133 hives in this trial. So plenty, sometimes half with guards or half out all the time. So they had guards on all the time. There's no crossover of this. And you can see between the controls with no guards on, this would be the number of hives that had no change in mite count, which what we were looking for with the amount of treatment we put in them. And the screen entrances had slightly fewer mites. A number percentage of the hive. So okay, so all these columns add up to 100%. So all the blues will add up to 100%. So then another 15 or 17% of the controls went up by my count of 5, but 14% of the ones with the screen entrances went up. Then you look at the outliers, the ones where you had my count going up by 35 or so. That was only on the controls, but even on the screened ones, you had a couple of them also go up. So no big difference here. And same thing down. Some of them, the mite counts went down. So maybe if you were selling the product, you'd say, yeah, this means maybe they helped a little bit, but I wouldn't be betting money on this. So that bothered me. 2 trials that we really couldn't say absolutely no, but we couldn't say yes. So trial number 3, the next year, we did a crossover trial. The problem on this one here, oops, that's supposed to be 2 right there, is that we had, in both the previous ones, we had too low mite immigration coming in. But we were disappointed that we just did not see much mite immigration. So this trial, we got smarter. So we set up 25 nice strong hives here late in the summer. And then partway through, we added behind them, we moved in a dozen collapsing high mite hives as mite donor colonies. We knew from previous experience that if we put mite donors next to them, your immigration will go up, either due to these hives robbing them or from bees from these hives drifting into these hives. So here's where our mite drop counts, which were pretty low from middle of July up until middle of August. And what we found was there, as we usually see, about half the hives are low immigration hives. We don't know whether it's because of the guards or because they don't smell good to drifting bees, but about half the hives just get no immigration at all. So we divided up the whole test yard into 2 groups. There were of hives, the high mite immigration ones that consistently day after day got more mites compared to the lower ones. So these ones we kind of ran for controls here. And you see, at this point, we moved the mite donors. When we moved the mite donors, look at the daily mite counts. They started, immigration went way up when we moved in the mite donors. So now we were ready to actually put the guards on here and see if we had an effect. It's too hard with very low mite counts to see if there's an effect. We needed to have higher mite counts. Now, if we look here, the high mite count hives, so these are total counts we got over the course of the trial for each hive of immigrated mites. So I highlighted red any that got more than 100 mites coming in. Here's where the mite donor hives were. These were all the test hives. But look at the layout. It tended to get on the edges of the yard, these high mite colonies. That's suggesting that a lot of this is not from robbing, but from drift. If it was from robbing, it would be even. It's apparently from just drift of bees from these hives coming to getting confused and coming to the edge of this yard and drifting into the hives that they first encountered. And this is my impression that much of mite immigration is just bees getting lost, flying upwind until they smell the odor of a hive and then flying into the first hive. Now, I don't have hard evidence of that, but that's my impression from all my drifting bees studies. So we had all the hives in pairs. We'd flip a coin and decide which one had the robbing screen on and which one we would prop up so it had no robbing screen on. The bees could just walk right in and out freely. That made it easier for us to do the crossover trial, flip them back and forth. Now, I did a correlation between the weather. So this is your semi-weekly mite drop count in the blue right here. And the red is your daily high temperature. So we started out temperatures up in the 90s right here. And then it started in September. We had a couple of cold days and a couple of days of rain. If you're doing a mite immigration count, this is your chance to see whether you actually had mite-free hives, because your mite count is going to drop to 0 on those days when it is rainy or cold, when the bees are not flying. And you can see that's exactly what happened here. You drop down to right here, very, very low mite immigration for the yard any day where it's dropped. Because the mites come into the hive, they have to be exposed to the miticide, and then they die and they drop off. So they don't necessarily drop off the same day that they come in. So this is a validation that we actually had mite-free hives. Here is the final data, all here. And I think this one's up on my website now. So this shows when we put the screen on, when we reversed them here. So what we found was drops were reduced in all the hives when we first put the screens on both hives. And then we took them off of one set of hives, half the hives right here. So what you want to see then, and then I also included our low immigration unscreened controls. And I left them in 2 groups. They're all the same, just so you can see the variation between half and the other half. And you see they tracked almost equally of mite immigration, but they never had high immigration. These guys had no guards on at all, the 2 blue lines here. The high immigration ones, if it's a dashed line, that means they had a screen on. If it's a solid line, they had no screen on. So we put screens on both of these, and both of them dropped, but they also dropped in the unguarded control hives. So that's we don't know, that's the weather or something's doing this. So now we're looking for, again, the inflection point right here. So screen on here, when the screens went on, wow, there was a less increase than there was on the ones with no screens here. So dotted line means that's a screen on. Then we swapped them again. And now when the screen's on, it went down, but it also went down on the ones with no screens on. So we did one more swap right here. And actually we had more mites coming into the ones with screens on. And they exactly the same, whether it's screen on or screen off. So in our 3 trials, we could not demonstrate that putting a robbing screen on a hive reduced mite immigration. Okay, I can't say that they don't do anything, but we tried really hard to find out if he can make that claim, and unfortunately, no, there's no data to make that claim. Now here's the other question. This is the cumulative mite drop for the entire time. Now we had 28 hives there and 12 collapsing hives. You had a collapsing hive, half a collapsing hive for every 2 hives in the yard. And this is our total number of mites coming in. The highest over that entire time period got a little over 200 mites coming in. All these low mite hives, they got around 40 to 50 mites coming in total. Keep these numbers in mind. Highest number was 200 mites coming in. The rest are averaging maybe 100 mites coming in over the entire course of the trial. So let's run 2 simulations. In my model, you can type in a number for your amount of mite immigration coming in. So I'm running exactly the same two simulations right here, putting in two 95% mite treatments as a beekeeper would do, one in August and one maybe in October. This would be the time when mites come in. And then I typed level 3 here to put 1,000 mites coming into the hive. 1,000. Now remember, when we go back here, we're talking even with high prevalence of collapsing hives, you're talking 100 mites coming in. I'm putting in 10 times that many. And the model, the simulation in the model shows you get almost exactly the same Varroa counts. That this says people who are blaming mite immigration. Now it could happen if you have a lot of collapsing colonies, but if you're getting 50 mites coming in over the course of late summer, it's not going to change your mite counts in your hive. And this is what I'm telling the New Zealand beekeepers: stop blaming everything on mite immigration. You've got a different problem. You're wasting your time blaming the wrong cause. You got that, Pat? Okay. Okay, now I'm still really curious about robbing screens, okay? So I was wondering, well, just how well do they work, really, to keep bees from drifting into a hive? And when you put a robbing screen on, the foragers get really confused. But you come out at night, they're not there, which means one of three things happened. They died, but you don't see dead bees, so that's out. Or they just flew away to get lost and die somewhere else, or they drifted to another hive, or they found their way in. They found their way in. The assumption is that they find their way in. Well, if they can find their way in, why wouldn't a robber find his way in? Okay, so I was curious about that. If these guys are confused but can find their way in, would a robber also find its way in? Or maybe they're not finding their way in. Nobody that I know knew that, so I thought we'll find out. Same thing with the New Zealand screens. You see just the pile up at all the holes. They go to the scent right here, into the scent right there. But some do find their way in. So we had already done a study a few years ago following Norm Geary's technique of using a little hand punch to punch out these little tiny steel magnetic, not magnetic, but steel, not magnetized, but magnetic discs that we can paint and color code. And then we use a high-tack glue to put a little dab of glue on the back of a bee, holding it down with a piece of plastic here and gluing on tags on them. We went 2 hives and either went to the entrance or pulled the cover back and picked up guard bees with soft insect forceps, one at a time, and glued a tag on. We use guard bees because a bee normally only guards for about 1 day of its life. A few of them will guard for a few days, but most bees guard for only about a day in their life. And then they immediately initiate foraging. So your last job before you become a forager is a guard, which means that your first flight out for a guard bee will be his first forager flight going out. It may have flown out once before to defecate, but his first flight out as a forager will be after we have tagged them. We did this so that when well, here we are tagging them right here. You just glue the tag on their back. So then we tagged them. They walked into the hive or flew into the hive, and then we put an entrance guard over that hive, and we put a magnetic trap to the hive on either side. If any bee with a tag tries to walk through this magnetic trap, it's got neodymium magnets which yank the tag off its back. And we can turn this over each day and see how many bees from this hive entered these hives. So we put this on. Now, the reason we did guard bees is we wanted those bees not to be accustomed to going in and out of the entrance. Their first flight would come out of this hole right here. So when they returned, they wouldn't be confused to try to get back into here. We gave them the best chance possible of all the bees. We did not tag any foragers who were used to coming in and out the front of the hive. The only bees we tagged were non-flying guard bees that first flight after tagging would have exited through this hole. Okay, I felt that was really important to make sure that somebody couldn't say, well, you tag foragers who were used to coming in and out. No, these were guard bees. Let's see what I got. The next day, we saw plenty of bees. We filmed, we have videos of these bees. We watched them going back and forth and up and down, round and round, and then they would give up, fly away. And then they'd come back and they try it again, and then they'd fly away and they come back. And then some of them finally made it in, but some we didn't see come back. So that was very interesting to us. At the end of the first day, we pulled off the magnetic traps, and 33% of those bees had drifted to another hive. A third of the bees that we tagged never got back into their own hive. They drifted to one of the hives next door. We were absolutely stunned. We could not even believe it. So we tried it again with another set of 100 bees, changing the color of the tags, because some of these bees that we tagged are still in the hive a month later. They never flew. So actually, it's still being underestimated because some bees have not yet flown. In the first day, this is what we get. And what we see is usually it's only 2 days where you have much drift. But you come back later, you can see that some of the bees living in the hive may never have flown. If we put a magnetic trap on that hive, that traps pulls the tags off the rest of the bees, but you still find some non-flying bees in the hive. So these are underestimates here. We tried it again, it went down to only 20%. So we went over to another yard with a whole bunch of hives that we could, 25 hives, one of which we would tag bees in, and 24 we put the magnetic traps on. And we got 15% loss the first day, our first 2 days. This one we got 24%. And then we changed from the plastic robbing guard to the wire mesh one, and we got 21%. So the average drift for all these runs was 1/5 of those bees on their first flight, foraging flight, never made it back into their own hive. Or I should say, made it into another hive. We don't know the ones that didn't make it back, but we know at least 1/5 of bees were lost. Now, every single day, you've got bees taking their first flight. If a queen's laying 1,500 eggs a day, you got 1,500 bees a day taking their first flight. If you're losing 1/5 of them every single day on that first flight, that's a substantial effect on a colony. If you say, oh, this colony got a high mite load, maybe I should put a robbing screen on it so it doesn't get robbed. Well, you're taking 1/5 of those young bees, which are carrying mites every day, and drifting them into your other hives. You're doing exactly the opposite of what you want to do. So I feel that this finding deserves some further research on the effect of robbing screens. So then I still was intrigued. If you can thwart a quarter of your returning foragers, how about a scout bees? Are they going to give up also, like the foragers do? So we did. We made scented syrup. We took 50% sugar syrup and added a little bit of anise scent. We used anise scent because there's nothing that smells like anise blooming in our area. We performed these trials just this last few weeks during our late summer dearth. There's not much going. And the bees, once they're trained to this scent, any scent of anise on the property, they will be going to. So we started out doing it. We just put a drawn comb down, poured it on, and we get robbing going on here very quickly. Then we clean this all off, and then they disappear. And then you wouldn't see any bees, or just the occasional bee. And we poured it back on. They wouldn't come back in a mob. You'd have the occasional bee come back. When that bee came back, it would go back, and in a few minutes, you'd have a bunch. What you have in honeybees, you have foragers, you have scouts, and you have investigators. Investigators are bees that don't give up. Once a flower stops blooming or something, or source of sugar disappears, they keep checking back, depending on how good it was, for a week or more. You can see this very easily if you ever have a box of combs getting robbed. Put a net over it, let the bees out, and the bees you'll have a big cloud of bees on it for a few minutes. Then they all just give up and say, no return on investment. They don't bother to come back. But you'll see a few investigators coming back day after day after day, just checking it out, even with no return. Yeah.
Okay, what about if all the hives had robbing screens?
That's pretty scary. That means that could those foragers get into any of them? That's an excellent question. That's why I'm raising this question. I agree with you. That's a good question.
And how about if did you do control hives to see how much drift happens without robbing screens at all? So with or without.
We've done that previously. That's a very low amount. What we've got before, about 3.5% from collapsing hives, not from normal hives. So it's normally a fairly low amount. Depends on how crowded your yards are. Any more questions? Oh, okay. So the investigators keep coming back. Now, when you put out scents, and we put a couple of these out into the, here we go, into the yard, and the bees, once they start going pretty well. And look at how shiny those bees are. They get shiny because they get their hairs rubbed off their bodies by the other bees and by their thinning themselves. So when you see these shiny bees on your combs, you know your colony's been robbing somebody else. So they're often confused with hairless black syndrome or chronic bee paralysis virus, but their wings are not tattered and they don't tremble. So that's how you tell chronic bee paralysis virus from these shiny. See, look at that shiny abdomen right here. Look at the shiny abdomen. There's no hairs left on them. This is very typical of robbing bees. So if you got shiny bees on your combs, they are probably stealing honey from somebody else. And again, yeah, you can see that there. So we set these out, let the bees rob, and they're not robbing. Let them feed on this, and this trains them to the scent of anise. And then anywhere on the now when a forager finds a rich source of nectar, they fly back and they do the waggle dance. But these were all on our property. So it would not be the figure-8 dance, it would be the round dance, which means there's no direction component. All they're saying is that it tastes like this, it smells like this, and it's really good because we're dancing really hard. But it's the round dance, which means we're not going to tell you which direction or where it is or how far. Just go out and sniff for it. So when we're training these bees to the scent of syrup, immediately hives start sending out all these other foragers just sniffing around for that scent of that syrup. So we set up 4 hives, no bees in them, and put a scent inside with no syrup, and put little tiny computer fans on the top, so we'd be blowing a scent out the entrance. And we put the scent in here and we'd blow that down. And eventually took all the combs out of these. We did a lot of experimentation here, so that we could test putting a robbing yard on the front and then seeing whether the scout bees, so these are not returning foragers, these are bees from another hive who are cued to look for that scent to see if they can get in if there's no guard bees inside, or whether they will give up like the young foragers did. And I tried, I guess I didn't have a picture here. I tried first, let me go back. Before we did these, I didn't put a picture in. On the front of these hives, I went to make I had a black window screen. I wanted to make a trap that would fit inside the robbing guard, so we could trap the bees that came in and then count them, and then quantify the counts on them. And I found out it was about impossible to get a scout bee or a forager, or investigating bee, to come to the front of that hive in that plume of odor coming out. They wouldn't land at the entrance. They go back and forth and back and forth. And what we found is that's not a sign of robbing. Oh, I didn't include this. It's a sign of just approaching a source and trying to figure out where it's coming from, because it's not coming from a flower. We bought some artificial flowers and put them out that were very realistic looking, and the bees paid no attention to them whatsoever. And then we got filmed videos of the bees. We put a drop of anisette in the corolla of those artificial flowers, and the bees coming don't land on the flower. They come in and act the same way as people say robber bees do, that zigzag flight back and forth. That's not a robbing flight. That's not evil intent. That's not a scouting flight. That's just a bee figuring out where the heck's that scent coming from. It doesn't look like a flower that I'm familiar with. So it's a totally normal behavior. And Norm Geary wrote about this in American Bee Journal in 1966. Okay, I posted this article to my website yesterday, so people can read about this article. I'm going to cite it in the that'll come out in the next issue of American Bee Journal, and it's worthwhile reading what Norm wrote in 1966, quashing the whole concept that bees are robbing or that they're acting guilty or they're nervous. I think this is normal bee behavior. And if I put a screen in front of the hive, they just did not want to land at all. So we gave up on putting screens in front of the hives. So we ran the test, just putting the Bee Smart on, or the other ones, and we would run the 4 of them, and we would swap them in locations to see what would happen. We put our scent in an empty hive here, and then we put a plexiglass clear cover on. I have these clear covers so I can do pollen sub feeding trials and watch the bees through here while they're feeding. So we just would look through here and we'd count the bees with our eyes. And that's what we just spent all day today doing, is counting hundreds and hundreds of bees that flying into these screens. And here we go. Here's Rose counting bees, looking at a couple of the hives. We did a bunch of these just in pairs. Sometimes we do just pairs, sometimes we do 4 of them. And so here's what we did here. So this would be how many minutes here, how many bees came into the control hives that had no guard, and how many came into the Bee Smart or the robber guard, the New Zealand one, or the screen ones. And so I put it over here. So what you're seeing is the control is the black column. So comparing how many came into Bee Smart compared to the controls, actually more came into the Bee Smart than the controls on this one. And then in this one, 20 in the controls and none in the Bee Smart. And the rest of the time, pretty fair numbers coming into the Bee Smart ones compared to the controls. Robber guards, you see almost none coming in compared to the controls. One time we had more coming in compared to the controls. And with the screen ones, huge numbers coming in controls and almost no coming into the screen. So of the types of robber guards we're looking at, the screens and the New Zealand one appeared to outperform the plastic one, wherever that is. Oh wait, I'm going the wrong way. This one, I'm not sure that it has enough space here to get proper ventilation. You have this opening right here, and when we did the smoke test, when we filled these hives full of smoke and put a little tiny computer fan inside, we found that a goodly amount of the scent inside the hive came out of this opening. And we watched the bees, when they come up, they wiggle a bit and they go right into this opening. So I'm not putting down anybody's design, but that one, the bees, doesn't slow the bees down very much. Next question, can they actually prevent robbing? So all these tests were done with no reward, no sugar syrup, only the scent. So no recruiting bees would go back. What if you add sugar syrup? So now what we did, we put in the trays inside the hive, and we would call this robbing, okay, when you have a bunch of bees coming in here. So we would set them up, and this is what we did today with these exact hives, with 5 hives. So we have 4 different robbing guards on and 1 control. And then we just, we have the entrance closed up and we swap these around. Every run we move these to a different location, change their locations, and if one got a whole bunch of bees coming in, we swap that hive body and lid and tray to another bottom board and dish. So we're mixing them up and making sure, and we leave them closed up until we see equal activity in front of all of them, and then we pull the plugs out and then see what happens with the bees. Once we get at least 20, but preferably like 60 bees in the one that has the most, that's robbing going, then we just do the count of how many are in all the rest and record that. So this is the first run, where our first run, so up to run number 6. And so some of them, we took 2 counts. This is run number 6 at 13 minutes and run number 6 at 33 minutes. Sometimes in just a few minutes, you got that dish full of bees. So we can only count so many. So once we get over 60 bees, we stop and count them all. So here what you see is, again, we have the controls are the black, the plastic one, Be Smart, is the green, the New Zealand stainless steel is the blue, and the screen, the orange. And every single run, we got robbing going in the control with no guard first. So these definitely slow robbing way down, but they don't stop it. Eventually, you wind up getting robbing at everyone to wait long enough. So we look at the sums. This is a comparison of how much it deterred scout bees trying to get in. This would be the baseline. We'd expect to have this many scout bees getting in, and some designs apparently work better than others. I have the data sheet right here. This is today's data right here. We just finished 7 different runs, and we got almost exactly the same. I don't know. Can you read that, Pat? I can't hear you.
Barely.
Okay, so on this column for the controls, these were all 20s or 60s. That's where we would stop the count. Most all of these are down in the single digits. And again, we got exactly the same result we got on the data that's on the screen right now, where the the screen ones perform best and the plastic one perform the least. So there's still daylight here. When I'm done talking, I just picked out a dozen nucleus colonies up there, and I put boxes next to them. I'm going to run up before it gets dark. I'm going to put a nuke into singles and let them settle down overnight. And tomorrow we're going to go out. We're going to put robbing guards, flip a coin, put them on half of them. And then we're going to pour some scented syrup inside those hives, and then put a dab of scented syrup on the entrances of all the strong hives in the yard. And we're going to see whether putting robbing guards on actually prevents robbing, because it's all about the guard bees now. If the problem that we see is that the guard bees, they cue to 2 different things: how the approaching bee behaves in its flight, and then the scent. The flight is the main thing. The main thing that cues the guard bees is the way the bees are flying. That the bees from that colony, when they return, they just go boom and fly straight in. A bee that comes in and goes, whoa, 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 that says the guards, this bee doesn't know what home is. This is not its home. It's a foreign bee, and we better guard. When you put a robbing guard on, I don't see the guards looking at the entrance of the robbing guard. So I'm wondering whether putting a robbing guard actually thwarts the guards from doing their job. They would have to recognize an invader by the smell. And studies by Free and others years ago said the guards much of the year will let other bees with different smell in with a minor inspection, unless there's a whole bunch of them coming in. You have to have like 50 bees from other hives coming in before the guards get activated. So by tomorrow afternoon, I may have the answer to that question, whether robbing guards actually even prevent robbing. So I'm going to make intentionally weak they're 5-frame nukes, enough bees to guard a normal entrance. And we'll see if putting guards on, if we initiate robbing, and if the guards help it. How much time I got left?
10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay. So it's all about the guards right here. And this is the big question now for robbing screens, whether they need to see the approaching bees or not. And you can tell guard bees, they stand only on 4 legs, their front legs up, their antenna out, their wings cocked out, ready to fly. And if you move near them, their head follows your movements. That's what a guard bee does. They're looking for motion. That's why you don't make any fast movements around a beehive if you disturb it, because the movements, everything. When I'm working with beginning beekeepers side by side on hives, and I keep saying, I see that movement out of the corner of my eye. If I see that movement, I can guarantee you the guards are going to tag you. I guarantee you, and bang, they get stung. I said, I saw that movement. I can tell you're going to get stung. And over and over again, I said, you do it again. Stop the movement. Move slower. No jerks. Stop the jerks. So if I have a group of people show up for like a class, I will tell them before the class starts who will get stung. Because I just look at their body. I look at the twitching. If you're twitching out there, you're going to get stung. If you just stay smooth and don't jerk, the bees will generally leave you alone. That works with actin bees. That works with any bees I've worked with. So, here's the question. Yeah, I don't normally see guards in this area. You would think that they would be, but they apparently stay down lower on. So that's why I'm questioning how these work. Oh, here we go. Here's those screens I was testing. A slow motion. Look at those bees. They're not touching down. There's a fan blowing that smell out. They know it's coming, but they never even try going in the entrance. So that's why a robbing guard thwarts them from coming in. It's just, if they do land, they're not going to want to try to come in. What is that? Okay, I'm also working on pollen subs. We're actually running a large trial right now with several hundred hives, testing different formulations for a large manufacturer. Everybody wants to put all the fancy names on their pollen subs, everything, everything imaginable into their pollen subs. I highly question whether any of that's necessary. I question whether natural pollen is necessary. I have very strong data that adding probiotics does not help in a pollen sub or any of the probiotics on the market in the US. I question the sterols. I question pretty much everything. Anyway, so I am now looking at phagocytosis by putting various scents or plant products, mixing with them. So I have controls versus other ones. I put those plexiglass covers over here and can feed them to hives and see which ones disappear first that the bees like to eat. But first, you got to get one that the bees like to eat. So I got this kind of research going on. Then I have the essential amino acid concentrates that I can balance out a very cheap diet. I'm hoping to create a diet that is very inexpensive for beekeepers to use. We spend tens of thousands of dollars on pollen sub. We'd like to reduce our costs. Oh, here, okay, so I have time to show you on the Thymol about whether there's I did a test putting in this homosode acoustic soundboard different amounts of Thymol. So this is 12 grams per hive, 24 grams, 36 or 48, 6 colonies for this one, 7 for that. And then look at percent mite reduction and get a dose response curve. So for 100% mite reduction, it looks like it should happen about 40 grams. So that's where I came up with the 40-gram dose. So this is preliminary research the first year. So the next year, we tried it. So in very hot weather, 95-degree weather, we put an 1.5 inch rim on top of the hives and put 40 grams in. Now, 10 grams right here if you just took 10 grams of Thymol and put it on a paper towel, put it in the middle of the brood nest, it would drive the bees out of the hive. They'd all just leave. It'd be too intense. But if you put it in the homosode soundboard, then it slows down the release and they can handle that. What I found is that some colonies moved the brood nest downward and then backfilled the brood area in the top box with nectar. So, but other ones completely ignored it. And this is all white wax built after we put this in, and they had brood right up to the block. So some colonies ignore it, some colonies move away from it, but they don't abandon those combs at all. The ones that abandoned or moved the brood down to the top box, the queen kept laying eggs, but there never been any young larvae. So apparently, I don't know if the eggs died or whether the nurses cannibalized them, but we never would see these eggs turn into larvae here. But down in the lower hive body, we always had unbroken brood rearing through the entire treatment. And whereas if you use some of the Thymol products, you get a brood break for a while, or you maybe get some pupil kill. We saw this was very, despite 40 grams, very mild on the brood rearing. So here's 21 days post-application. Here's Corinne pulling out one of the combs from the upper box right below these in hot weather. And that's all cap brood. That means that they don't cap until 8 days after eggs are laid. So that means these eggs were all these larvae were successfully reared in a really nice, strong pattern right during this treatment in hot weather in the upper brood chamber. So very, very mild. So the good news is it's really easy on your bees. Now, there's two reasons we keep honeybees, or two. One, because you want to keep your honeybees alive. And the other was that you keep them for varroa food. Many beekeepers, from best I could tell, their main reason for keeping honeybees is to feed their varroa mites. Okay, if you're a varroa mite keeper, it's bad news because the varroa mites all disappeared. So incredibly high efficacy. The blue is our starting mite count. Clear up some of them. This is almost 80 mites in a mite wash. The red is your ending mite count. Notice the absence of red. If there's no red, Pat, you can fill this one. If there's no red, what's the ending mite count? You got it, 0. I have never seen a treatment as efficacious as those Thymol blocks. In hot weather, in a rim on top of a double D, just across the board, just no failures at all, and zeroing it out in 21 days. Very, very exciting treatment. This is in our area. I don't know if it works in other areas, but this is very, very exciting right here. Let's see. Oh, we tried this other test. Oh, here this is again. Okay. Again, I just threw this, I threw this whole PowerPoint together for you at the last minute today. Tell you what, unless we want to start another deep subject, maybe we should just answer some questions.
Okay, back to the pollen sub. How do you tell if the bees ate the pollen sub or simply moved it or cleaned it out of the hive?
You look at the bottom board. The bottom board, they suck the nectar out of it and they drop it down to the bottom board. You see it laying in front of the hive, or you can use a screen bottom or put in a sticky board. Any of those will tell you whether they're eating it or not. The other way I do it is I use a fluorescent tracer and I look in their guts. You don't have to use a fluorescent tracer, but if you dissect the bees, do a gut squash, very easy to see if they're eating it or not. With the fluorescent tracer, and that's I am going to be feeding it with fluorescent tracer starting this week. I want to track how long they keep that in their guts during the winter when they're not flying. So I've already done that, taking bee samples throughout the winter every week to see with pollen, but I want to put a fluorescent tracer in now and see.
Okay, a lot of beekeepers try to vaporize oxalic acid early in the morning to get every bee. On BL, you mentioned that your titration showed the bees actually pick it up from walking on the comb.
Yes.
So it would actually work just as well to vaporize when the field force is flying?
That would be my guess. When I take a box of drawn comb without bees, and I go to a hive, I get some young bees that aren't going to fly away, and I put a few young bees on all that drawn comb and then vaporize it. So I didn't want a cluster. I wanted to have uniform, so I can then pull some of those young bees off the combs immediately and measure how much oxalic acid is on their bodies, and then let them walk around for an hour in that comb, and the amount of oxalic acid triples on their bodies. I'm going to be doing a lot more of that testing with the vaporization, starting here with as we get cold weather, and get it really detailed now on exactly with different types of vaporization, at comb by comb, the amount of oxalic acid on the average bee.
Is Thymol vapor heavier than air?
It is. And as I was talking about that, about density and buoyancy, many beekeepers are under the mistaken understanding that moist air is heavier than dry air, and that's wrong. Moist air is much less dense than dry air. So moist air will always rise in dry air. I set up some upside down plastic tubs this summer with humidistats top, middle, and bottom to check this out, and then put a dish with a towel at the bottom. And the humidity at the top of that upside down tub was always 99% at the very top, 75% in the middle, and 50% near the bottom. So the moisture always is less buoyant than dry air and floats to the top. And that's why during the winter, you have not only is it warmer, but it's moisture. So you have all your moist air goes right at the top of the hive, which is why you want to use top insulation.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Randy.
You bet. Does it sound like I'm having fun?
All right, good night.
Okay, good night.